Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4, testing, testing.
You're on.
Okay, welcome to Ecologic for the month of July. Hot time of the year, I guess, in a lot of ways, but we've been fortunate that we've avoided any big tropical lows of storms from coming through. And we have our guest tonight, Dave Dixon. He's chairman of the Dredge of a Million Group, bunch of volunteers working to solve the dredge problems. Before we go into our program, which involves a meeting with the Vols in St. Landry Parish and working with those folks and some of the issues that they are planning that will help us a lot, we think, in flood control. I just want to talk briefly, Congressman Higgins working with us potentially on a proposed national park for the Chaffly Basin. And it involves an area shown on the map, all outlined in black, that's about 27 miles long from Catahoula to the Sheraton Canal, along the levee as the east side, and the high water mark around the lakes for Granville Cove, which is part of Grand Lake, the Lake Foss Point and Lake Dotree. And goes all the way up to the Forks at Catahoula Lake. And in that, we have probably around 90,000 acres of wetland swamp that all belongs to the state. And it's only the state-owned property. It's an area that has no one living in it, except maybe houseboats that are weekend residents, a few houseboats. It has, I think, 5 boat landings, boat landing at Granville Cove, Lake Dotree, Lake Catahoula, at Henderson, which is slightly above, but also at the Generate Canal. It's a roadless area. It's an area that has very few canals. It's natural and has miles and miles of shoreline of beautiful old growth cypress. And that's the part that we hope to preserve. Right now, it has no protection. So it's just a proposal at this point. It's the legal designation of that area was set by the Louisiana Supreme Court in 1919 and by the Placid case in the 1980s. So there's legal precedent for what we plan to do. So anyway, that's just a proposal at this time. It's an idea. Anyway, Dave, tell us about meeting with the Falls Parish Police Jury. I think all the members were there. The Falls Parish representative, Mr. Desertel, was there. And so share with us what their plans are. And
Okay.
by the way, some of these plans or issues we've worked with and somewhat suggested to them that these may be opportunities to help solve the big flood issue and solve the need for fresh water during drought conditions as we're suffering right now.
Well, Harold, we had this meeting back in, earlier this month, earlier in July. It was originally requested by St. Landry Parish because there was concern on St. Landry Parish's part that they would be impacted by these projects that the Falls Parish is proposing to do. So a meeting was called by between St. Landry and the Falls, and that quickly expanded to us in Lafayette, and involved Lafayette Parish, Fred Trahan, who's the supervisor of the engineering staff for LCG. So we had parties there from Falls, St. Landry, Lafayette. St. Martin was invited, but they didn't show. It was a real good meeting, and it started out with them telling us about what they wanted to do, what they were proposing to do up in the Falls, which we're going to show you some slides and some pictures with some maps that show where these projects are. We're also going to show some remaining projects that we've been tracking, that we either identified as a regional project for the Tesh Vermillion watershed, or a project that we are proposing to do in the Tesh Vermillion watershed to mitigate flooding problems. So with that, I'll ask for the first slide here. Okay, just to remind everybody what our watershed looks like. It's in the rectangle there. Tesh Vermillion, the main drains in the Tesh Vermillion are the Bayou Tesh and the Vermillion River. Next slide, please.
Let's see if I can find it.
Should be.
Let's see if it comes up. My little database of them went away. Let's see if I can find it. I have to find Jake.
Should be,
They were all at the bottom, and all the thumbnails went away as soon as I clicked on that first one. Hang on, let me go back to you for just a second.
all righty.
Hang on,
All right, we're having a little technical difficulty right now.
second one's gonna come up now.
We'll get it, all right, there we go. Okay, so this is kind of a very simplified drainage map of how the water gets out of the watershed. The watershed extends all the way to north of Alexandria, and the water, all the water right now has four different paths. It can go to the Gulf of Mexico. One of them is through a gate up on the Henderson Levee, north of Henderson, Louisiana, but right south of US 190. And that gate can be used if the water in the Henderson Lake area is low enough. Another path is down Bayou Amy, which is the borrow pit for the levee, to Lake Falls Point, and now Lake Falls Point back into Bayou Tesh. And then from Bayou Catawba to Bayou Tesh, which is Bayou Catawba and Bayou Tesh meet together in the town of Port Barre. And then downstream on Bayou Tesh in the town of Arnoldville, the Vermillion River branches off as Fusilier Bayou and then changed to Vermillion Bayou, then eventually to Vermillion River. So there's really only three drains that actually hit the Gulf of Mexico.
And it's worth pointing out that this time, those three drains functioning during the flood. During low water, as of now, the only drain is from the Vermillion and over the dam at the Tesh. There are gates that are closed, keeps water from going to Henderson. There are gates that are closed, big weirs, two of them 500 feet long, that keep the water going from like down at the Lake Falls Point.
Right.
So virtually during low water and normal water, which is probably 90% of the year, 2/3 of the water goes down to Vermillion and 1/3 down to Tesh.
All right. So if we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, I gotta go back to you first. And then go to the next slide.
Okay, we have some guiding principles. Anything we propose, we won't propose anything that's going to do any harm to anybody. And we want to maximize the potential to use our natural floodplains like Cypress Island Swamp, like the Lake Coquetry area, like the overflow swamps that connected to Bayou Catawba. We want to remove obstructions. There's a lot of man-made obstructions in the, we're going to show you some of them in some of our slides here that are obstructing flood flows. And that includes fall banks, dams, actually some coastal restoration projects that had some unintended consequences. So we want to divert flood waters where it's possible to do a diversion. You're going to see some of that. And anything we do, we'd like to, if possible, improve the water quality. And some of these projects do greatly enhance water quality by moving fresh water into areas that are blocked and that are stagnant right now. And of course, that'll improve wildlife habitat if you can improve the water quality. And then the last thing we want to do is that we want to formalize the management of all the flood control assets in the watershed, to where all the parties involved with managing these assets are coordinated and working together when there's a threat situation like a tropical storm or some predicted flood. Next slide, please, sir. And this should be our first project we're gonna talk about. We're gonna start at the north side of the watershed. Lake Cocodrie, it doesn't show very well here, but maybe on your TV screen you might see it better. There's an orange block, rectangle, and it's got an arrow pointing to where they propose to put a gate to be able to drain Lake Cocodrie. Right now, there's a small gate there. That particular area is 100,000 acre feet of storage as per Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries. And if they put this gate there that is bigger than the existing 4-foot gate, they could drain it to and operate the lake at a lower pool stage, hopefully back to its normal traditional stage of the bayou itself. And that would provide a tremendous amount of retention in the water, the northern part of the watershed. So water from Alexandria, west side of the watershed, Alexandria coming down here, would be retained in that lake before it would come down to the lower part of the watershed. Would be a huge asset to managing a flood in a hurricane situation. You want to go to the next slide, please? And the next one should be a diversion project. Okay, and this is one of the projects that was proposed by Balls Parish. Again, there's a rectangle or orange rectangle on your screen there, and that's diverting Bayou de Glaze water. A little bit of story about Bayou de Glaze. Bayou de Glaze on the northeastern part of the watershed. It's watershed is 270 square miles, which is bigger than Lafayette Parish itself. Right now, the drain is blocked because of a problem they had with the floodgate they had that was damaged during the flood of 1973 on the Mississippi River. And they're proposing an alternate drain, which will probably actually work better to allow the water to go to the Atchafalaya River. Obviously, the only time that's going to be functional is when the river's low enough at Simpsport to drain. But during hurricane season, that's almost 100% of the time the river's going to be low enough to be able to take water from the northeastern part of the watershed and divert it into the river. Next slide, please. The next one's going to be a diversion also. All right, this is on the eastern side of the watershed. It's called the Chatelaine Lake Canal Diversion. And this Chatelaine Lake Canal is a drainage canal that drains the east side of Alexandria down to us, to Bayou de Glaze. And they're proposing to divert this flow from the Chatelaine Lake Canal through the Spring Bayou Wildlife Management Area, which is in desperate need of fresh water. So it provides, again, this is an example of providing a fresh water to a major fishing area up there, beneficial to wildlife and the fisheries in that area, and also has the function of managing floods. Instead of sending that water directly down to Lafayette and Pointe East on the Bayou Teche, you send that water down to this area in the Balls Parish that's in desperate need of fresh water. Next slide, please. Okay. All right, we're going to come a little further south. All right, this is a project that St. Landry Parish has got on the board. We've got some design money to do some design and modeling on it to provide a gate inside that orange block. There's a red arrow that connects Bayou Catawba to Bayou Amy. This is right south of US 190. where Bayou Catawba is blocked going into the Western Atchafalaya floodway or Lake Henderson. There is a gate there, but that gate can only be used when the water is low enough on the basin side to allow opening the gate. We've had some instances in the last few years where we had a flood going on in the spring, and we couldn't open the gate because the water was higher on the flood side, on the floodway side, than it was on the land side. So the only relief you have there is going down to Bayou Teche and the Vermilion River, or going over some weirs down to Henderson, and it's very much a flood risk. So we're proposing putting a gate here to allow an alternate path to be a diversion path down Bayou Amy, and that'll go down to about Lake Falls Point, back into Bayou Teche, southern part of the watershed, back into the Gulf of Mexico through the Jaws.
Let me just point out why that's so important. The Teche Vermilion keeps the water level at Catawba at that point right at 18 feet in round numbers. The weirs are at 18 feet. And the water that goes into below is normally around 2 or 3. So you have a 15-foot head there. The problem with keeping it at 18 is you keep the swamps, the Cocodra Buff Swamp, the Thistleway Swamp, the Waukesha Swamp, the Darbon Swamps, you keep them full. And so you've lost all this retention. And that's a real problem when the flood comes, because normally at this time of year, that water should be around 12. Now it's at 18. So when it comes, that's a man-made flood. So if we have a flood come, the whole water system is already flooded, including 100,000 acres of swamp. And so to be able to lower it quickly is super important to gain this enormous retention. And we experienced that with Hurricane Barry, when shutting off the pumps lowered the water level. And a big north wind was helping that too, but the water level dropped 2 to 3 feet in that 100,000 acres. And when the Weather Service and the USGS models showed that Hurricane Barry would bring the water at Lafayette to 16.9. Now the flood of August 16 was 17.1, so virtually everyone that flooded in 16 was going to flood again in Barry 19. The predicted level at Washington was 34, the highest it's ever been at 35. And when the big event came, which we had more rain in the upper end of the watershed than we had during August 16, the levels were 5 feet lower than the computer models showed. And that was mainly because that 100,000 acres of swamp had been drained.
Another point, Harold, that anybody that's lived in this area very long and traveled I-49 has seen these swamps in action up there. Lots of times I-49, both sides of I-49 are flooded, you know, and they're sitting right on the verge of a flood. The farmers up in that area are always complaining that their fields are right on the edge of flooding all the time. So anytime they get a big rain, boom, they're underwater up there. So anyway, that's a whole nother topic. We're gonna talk about that again in a minute. Want to give us the next slide, please? All right, well, one of the problems they have right now when they open that gate is that canal, the Grimmett Canal, you went ahead there, you can come back. Yeah, not quite ready yet. Okay, that canal that on the other side of that gate is called the Grimmett. It's the Bayou Catawba outfall, and it goes down toward Lake Henderson, but it's all plugged up. Had never been cleaned probably since it was constructed.
But it's only 3 miles long anyway,
Yeah, so it needs to be extended and
Yep.
cleaned out. Next slide. Okay. All right, now, Bayou Catawba is blocked off at the river too. Oh, I'm sorry. No, we're talking about revising, which is related to Bayou Catawba, the pool station of Bayou Catawba. We would like to get the Corps of Engineers, Mississippi River Commission, to look at the operating plan for Teche Vermilion freshwater. Again, we think that there may be opportunity to lower the pool stage there during months that we're threatened with flood. And yet Teche Vermilion could still possibly operate. we want that looked at from an engineering perspective. Next slide, please. All right, the Spall Banks in Cypress Island, you've probably seen stories in the news about this thing. Lafayette Parish removed it. That project is essentially complete. And so that'll allow flood flows in the Vermilion River, when the river flows backwards, to go to the lower part of that slide right there, lower part of the swamp, which is partially in Lafayette Parish and St. Martin Parish, reducing the crest that you see that gets in people's house. When you see these crests, when you get these flash floods going on, that removing that Spall Bank will attenuate that crest. Hopefully, the models indicate around a foot, and that's what we're estimating also based on the data we analyzed on this. Next slide, please. All right, in the St. Martin Parish, there's a Joe Day Canal, and it basically is a drainage path that connects the eastern part of the swamp, southeastern part of the Cypress Island swamp, to the Bayou Test south of the Keystone Dam. Now, what's significant about that? South of the Keystone Dam, the water level there is essentially the same water level as in Lake Falls Point. It's about 7 feet lower than the water level in St. Martinville. So the idea there is to allow that another drainage path for the swamp right now to drain down to Bayou Teche versus most of the water having to go down to go through the Vermilion River to drain the swamp. This project is in progress right now. They are in the process of clearing and snagging. We surveyed about 2 weeks ago. They were out there, and they're beginning to begin the dredging of the redredging of the canal. Part of that canal is a natural bayou. It passes right north of Spanish Lake and ends up in Bayou Teche. How far south of the Keystone, Harold? About a mile? Is it
yes.
a mile?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a couple miles south of St. Martinville. Next slide, please. All right, this is the dredging Catahoula Lake. You might be able to see a little island that's being pointed to in the lake there. That island was created by siltation. The lake is getting really shallow. And they had a dredge boat working out there a couple weeks ago. And over the course of a weekend, that island was gone. They dredged a complete island out of there. And that island was just naturally formed through siltation. So the lake was getting very shallow. That's the main drainage path of the Bayou Amy, comes through Lake Catahoula and through the Fingers back into Lake Dotrieve and then Lake Falls Point. So one of the main drainage paths for the watershed comes right through here. So St. Martin Parish is dredging this thing as we speak. The project actually may be finished now. They had a survey of the lake, and they said they only had to move about 70,000 cubic yards. So next slide, please. So that project should be complete very soon now. This is the gate Harold was talking about on the Henderson Lake. This particular gate right now is closed, and it's keeping Henderson Lake at about 10 feet. And the gate.
Beulah Rose is at 5, so it's keeping it 5 feet up. And one of the big issues, again, with a dam, you're maintaining a flood. If you had a big rain event and Henderson was at the level it should be at 5, you could put a lot more water in Henderson than if it's already up 5 feet above normal.
A little history on this. This was built when they put I-10 in. They put this, DOTD built this
Temporary gate,
temporary gate. Let's see, that was
1967, 68,
67, over 50 years ago.
for sure.
Temporary gate, temporary temporarily permanent. It is problematic. We needed to open it during a hurricane, I can't remember which one it was, or some storm.
It was Barry.
And,
It was Barry.
yeah, it was Barry.
Yeah, we got it
And
open.
we got it open, they had to bring a big track hoe, some boats and cables and chains
Divers.
and a diver, because the gate was broke. And they had to get a diver to go down and attach it.
Wrap a cable around a tree on the other side, and it was under enormous tension with backhoes and dozers trying to pull this gate wrapped around it, with a cable wrapped around a tree. That cable would have snapped, they'd have whacked 5 or 6 people.
Very dangerous operation. And we've asked them to try to repair this thing where it's reliable, some kind of way, or take it out or replace it. Next slide, please. All right, do we think there's an opportunity by putting a gate between Lake Martin and the Ruth Canal and utilize Lake Martin as a regional retention asset? And the idea there is you got about 800 something plus surface acres that you could lower that thing 3 or 4 feet, 5 feet, and establish some very inexpensive retention that's connected to the Vermilion River. So the Ruth Canal goes right into the Vermilion River, a couple miles from there. I don't even know if it's a couple, might maybe 1 mile or
It's
so.
about 2 miles.
2 miles down the route to the Vermilion River. You could lower the lake when there's a threat, like a hurricane, and then just leave the gate open. And when the flood comes, it'll just backfill through the same gate that you opened to drain it,
Sure.
putting some fresh water in the lake. There is a pumping system there, right there close to where we're proposing to put the gate. In the event the flood doesn't come, they could pump water out of the Ruth Canal and reflood the lake. So this is a project that could be done, that could improve water quality again in Lake
And
Martin.
fisheries and so
Because
on.
Lake Martin doesn't have any hydraulic exchange between the river unless there's a massive flood that comes over the top of the levee, like 2016.
There's
But,
only one drain that functions, and it would take, I think we figured it would drop, with no rain, it would drop the lake 1 inch a week.
Yeah, it's
which
not really
means
feasible.
It's not
for-
functioning, right, yeah.
Yeah. I got a question, Harold. During that spring flood we had last year in May, did the water I don't think it got high enough to top the levee over Lake Martin, so there wasn't any exchange there then either.
Not much, no.
Yeah,
And the big issue is Lake Martin's an impoundment that goes across the old oxbow of the Mississippi going back thousands of years ago, but it totally closes off the rest of the retention area that's kind of east of the lake. The lake goes from oak trees to oak trees, so it covers the whole bottom, and it's the deepest part of the Cypress Island Swamp. It's by far the deepest part. So you've totally lost that as retention. They keep the levee overflows at 17 feet, and you could drop it 12 feet. And I think it's right at 1,000 acres. I think the lake itself is 800 acres. But if you can drop it 10 feet, you got 8,000 feet of retention, which becomes real significant when you look at the retention area of Cypress Island itself. If the whole thing is 30,000 acres, 8,000 acres in Lake Martin would lower 4 or 5 inches.
we did a little survey on this when we proposed it, and I believe the day we were out there, the water level was 6 feet different between the lake and the
Yeah.
Ruth Canal. So you could drop it at least 6 feet if you wanted to.
Well, yeah, it was way
Yeah,
down.
yeah.
It was way, way down.
All right, next slide, please. All right, clear and snag the Vermilion River and spot dredge at Rotary Point. This project's half done, clear and snagging's done in Lafayette Parish. Lots of debris was removed from the river as part of that. I think it was like $250,000 were expended on that effort. They removed trees, they removed washing machines, they removed cars. They may have removed a few dead bodies too, I'm not sure about that. But anyway, Second phase of that is to a spot dredge around, Rotary Point. There's some severe shoaling there. That was the area that was dredged in 1997 after the 93 flood. That was, I think the Corps of Engineers managed that project. And that alleviated some problems after 93, but those shoals are back, and they are really, really bad. You can actually walk across the river when the river's in the 5 to 6 foot stage.
I was on it a couple of days ago. There's a mile stretch in there where the deepest part of the channel is 3 feet for a mile, right around Rotary Point. But the whole river is filled up with mud flats. So you got an area about 20, 30 feet wide that's 3 feet. The whole river originally was dredged as a box cut
Right.
channel, 11 feet deep, 100 foot wide. Now it's 3 feet deep and, with the whole box section of this has been lost. So your channel capacity is probably diminished around 90%. That's why we're flooding. And what is the source of all this sediment inflow? It's the fact that 70% of the water, 90% of the time, for the whole drainage area is going through the Vermilion. You drain in rice fields, crawfish ponds, you got floodwaters coming across this vast agricultural area, and plus the water from the Chaffelay, which is usually quite muddy, carries a lot of sediment, but it's not carrying it down to Vermilion at enough speed to carry it out towards the bay. It carries it about to Milton. And then, from Cooley, Eildek on and so forth, that so much flow is probably keeping enough velocity scouring it out below at where the Vermilion Parish line starts at Lafayette Parish ends.
Right. Another key point about this here is that the, because the shoaling, it reduces the channel capacity in the river. When Cypress Island Swamp or Bayou Tortue Swamp floods and it has a high level like it did last spring in, not this May, but the May before, it takes forever to drain because there's no channel in the river to allow the water to go out when
Well,
the river, when
The channel from the swamp to the river is very, very small. It's only 50 feet wide and 4 feet deep. So the outflow, you got 200,000 surface acre feet of water stuck in Cypress Island, and it can't leave. And the numbers are dramatic. If you look at Abbeville, after the flood of 016, it went back to flood stage in 4.5 days. It went from 14 to 9 in 4.5 days. Lafayette was at 17, before it got back to 10, was over 30 days. So all those homes at Cypress Island and up towards Sunset along the Vermilion, up in St. Landry and Lafayette and St. Martin, as well as the Cypress Island area, all that area stayed underwater for 30 days plus.
Yeah, next slide, please. Okay, well, the Corps of Engineers has got in the work plan for 2024 to go from the head of navigation on the Vermilion River down to the intercoastal waterway, clearing, snagging, and dredging the river. So this is the second phase of the dredging of the Vermilion River. We'll see if it remains in the budget and in the work plan. Hopefully it does. The river's in pretty decent shape south of Abbeville, but from Abbeville north to the head of navigation, Corps of Engineers has done several surveys, and the river is really, really silted up, really not suitable for navigation. They have problems getting the rock barges up to the E. Broussard Bridge when the water level's low.
They have to half load.
Right, if they run ashore of rock, they got a half load if they wanna bring some rock in there. Next slide, please. One of the things we've asked the parish to do is to design and model a channel training weir for Cooley-Ildacon and Vermilion River confluence. This may be a technique to be able to channel the water to prevent Cooley-Ildacon from blocking the river whenever there's a big flood going on and the water from Scott
It's mainly
is
to
dominating the river.
right, it's mainly to eliminate the backflow. And it's like directing a big hose right next to T intersection, so it's kind of blasting against the wall. What we want to do is put the hose through the door. And by diverting all that energy straight downstream, we think we can alter the backflow. And if that is successful, it's a very low-cost solution. One estimate is less than $1 million. Takes 2 weeks to do. It would require pilings and tongue and groove steel sheet pilings, and it's only about 400 feet long. It would take up 1/3 of the Vermilion, leaving the Vermilion open for navigation. It's 75 feet. The Vermilion is 210 feet wide at that point. So it would not interrupt navigation, but we would hopefully divert the flow downstream, totally eliminate the backflow issue. If we do that, we're lowering the water levels probably 5 to 8 feet.
Right, because this thing, we have evidence during the rain events last year in May, where this coulee was blocking the river, blocking the entire drainage of the river from the north, while it was unloading, until Cooley-Ildacon flow went down, was reduced low enough to allow the river to start draining. It was completely blocking the river, causing the river north of there to rise dramatically. The river at E. Broussard Bridge went from 6 feet to 14.7 feet in a matter of a few hours during that May flood of last year. Next slide, please.
I'll point out the Ildacon confluence and the water level it reaches is right at 20 feet, 19.92, and the dam on the Teche is at 10. So you got a hydro dam that is twice the height of the Keystone Dam on the Teche.
Okay, so this is another main outlet for the watershed. This is the drain that drains Lake Foss, the whole eastern side, Lake Foss Point, Lake Dotree, Bayou Amy, comes through here. It's called the Jaws Bay. And there was a coastal restoration project done in the early 2000s. Do you know what year it was done, Harold?
2002.
Right. And you
NOAA project.
You can see the terraces on this slide.
It's designed to capture sediment.
It's designed to capture sediment, and it really worked great. It killed the coastal erosion that was going on there, but the unintended consequence was that it blocked the drainage.
Now the water, instead of draining into Cote Blanche Bay, has to drain west all the way to Weeks Island to get into Vermilion Bay.
Okay,
It's gone all the way to Intercoastal City. And the Intercoastal is a much smaller channel than this channel. The Intercoastal is 150 by 12 feet. This channel is 200 by 40. So you
Before it was
gotta-
plugged up.
Totally plugged.
Totally
You
plugged.
cannot get a 14-foot flat with a 15 horsepower motor through it today.
So you see at the top of the slide, it says ICWW, that's Intercoastal Waterway. So the water right now, because it can't go out into Lake Cote Blanche Bay, right there, it's gotta go west 20 miles to the Vermilion Bay.
Yes,
It's actually changing the salinity
in the
in
bay,
Vermilion Bay.
absolutely.
Because of all the fresh water this thing is pushing to Vermilion Bay.
Affected shrimps, oysters, and a bunch of other issues.
So again, there's a water quality aspect to some of these projects that we're talking about. proposing here. This project was proposed as a LWI project
It's
by St.
proposed-
Mary Parish?
Well, yes, and it was selected as a QIPRA project. St. Mary Parish Levy Board proposed it, and then I proposed it as a QIPRA project. Got a national sponsor, which is absolutely necessary. But it's only a $2 million project, so the powers that be were not interested in $2 million coastal restoration project. They're interested in things like Terrebonne Island, which is $160 million.
That's a-
Or the Coal Bayou project in Vermilion Parish that restored 300 acres at a cost of $38 million. So we couldn't find $2 million to clear the jaws and keep thousands of homes from flooding.
Without putting some sort of, jetties in there, could you keep that channel clear, Harold?
It just
Or
has
you'd
to
have to-
be, it's only closed for about a mile, so it just require maintenance. I mean, if you close the Intercoastal Canal down for a mile today, by 2 days later, it would all be cleared. This was not, it's only 1 million cubic yards, which, a small hydro dredge can do it, and the spoil can be used to create marsh right alongside. That's already a marsh restoration zone. This should be, took about 20 years for it to fill up. So every now and then, somebody should check issues. That's one of the real important points in managing all this water. All these channels are changing. Mother Nature is a powerful force. And where water doesn't flow, the sediment drops out. And it's, as these channels change, it has an impact on our ability to manage floodwater. And somebody ought to be checking it, the Corps, whoever. Though the fact that we spend mega millions on navigation, we can't keep the Vermilion navigable to General Mouton. That's kind of, but we have spent $100 million to try to keep Morgan City viable. We spent $50-60 million to keep the ships going to Lake Charles. But we can't spend a few dollars to dredge the Vermilion or to keep the jaws open. These are navigation issues as well as flood control. But navigation is vital to the economy of our area. We are spending right now $37 million dredging the 9 miles of canal from the Intercoastal to the Port of Iberia. We're having to lower about 10 pipelines. $37 million to go 9 miles. It's at $5 or $6 million a mile. And all, not for flood control, totally for navigation. The port that has declined as the offshore oil industry has declined. And so, but we can find money for navigation, but we can't find money to deal with flooding thousands of homes and closing down the economy. When Lafayette was flooded, the whole area was flooded, we had about, a month where the Highway 90 was closed, Highway 14 was closed, had great disruption of the economy of our area.
Mhm. Well, next slide, please. Okay, there was, I don't know how we jumped over that one, but, the, up in the central part of the watershed, south central, there's a pipeline that crosses the floodway. It's called the Enterprise Dixie Pipeline, built in the 60s. And they did not backfill the pipeline trench. And they left the spall on both sides, and it's all plugged up now, and it hinders the drain.
You on air? Can we help you?
Yeah, are you guys taking calls yet, or?
Yes, sir. We welcome your call, Mr. Bob.
Okay. Harold, you said something that really struck me about 2 or 3 minutes ago, when you said where water doesn't flow, the sediment drops out. And in large part, I think that simple sentence sort of summarizes the whole problem that we have here, and that is the continued silting of all of the drains and flows for the Teche Vermilion watershed, in particular in Lafayette, the Vermilion River.
You're absolutely right. You think about the Jaws, the Vermilion River, Catahoula Lake. Let's go down all the list of the things that are closed just because of nature, doing what nature does.
Well,
But somebody would be watching the store and say, wait a minute, close the Vermilion, and it'll flood people all the way up to, Port Barry.
here's a
Yep,
good
and
example
so
of that.
It's sort of demonstrated by the fact that, we had a bunch of bad floods in the 1940s. They dredged the Vermilion in the 1950s. We didn't have any more problems until the early 90s. They spot dredged the Vermilion in 1997. We didn't flood again until 2016. It's because it had all silted up and stopped the river from flowing.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
The more it flows, the more it silts up, and it's just a self-generating phenomena that just keeps happening. And anyway, I thought that was really interesting, and
Well, thank you for sharing that.
just encapsulate the whole problem in that water gets impounded, it doesn't flow.
Yep.
And when you have a bunch of water that's impounded and you get a big rain event or a hurricane or something, then guess what? If you're already impounded with a bunch of water, you get a ton more,
Yep.
your house is underwater.
You have a man-made flood, with dams and everything.
whole thing,
Right.
man.
Then you put dams in, it's bad enough the channels will fill in, then you block it off with dams and gates that don't work and so forth. No wonder we
Right.
have flood problems.
That's
But
right.
most of these things are quite easily fixable. And I look at, just everything we talking about can be done probably for $20-30 million. And all the
Right.
gates we want, all the dredging we want to fix our problem. Dredge the Jaws is $2 million. Dredge a million might be $3 or $4 million at worst. And dredge Lake Catahoula, probably $1 million. So you go down and you spend $38 million trying to create 300 acres of marsh in Vermilion Parish. You spend $160 million trying to recreate a barrier island in Terrebonne Parish. I mean, really? No, where are our priorities?
This regional drainage system, which I'm not saying it was some grand evil design that somebody plotted, but it just pushes the bulk of the water from the watershed all the way up to Alexandria, ends up coming down the Vermilion River.
We
The
figured
Vermilion River's not even a river, it's just this sort of
it's a
floodplain.
ditch, it's an
The water
oversized
flows
ditch.
down, and the
Yep.
sediment drops out right around our houses,
Yep.
then we flood.
That's right,
Yeah,
you're absolutely
so-
right, yep. And,
I'm
I
glad-
I spoke to the engineer that is designing this $70 million model of the Louisiana watershed, and I asked him, will your model deal with the channel capacity in this whole system? Well, no, we don't have data for that, Well, with $70 million, I bet you could send Boudreaux out with a bamboo pole, he could find out how deep things are. Unless we know channel
well-
capacity, his model is worthless.
Yep, we gotta keep plugging, Harold.
All right, thank you so much for the call.
Good job, thanks, man, bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
All right, this Dixie Pipeline Spallback, that project is in progress right now, funded by CPRA and state legislature, and should be completed by the end of the year. So you wanna go on to the next slide, sir?
You on there? Can we help you?
Yeah, Mr. Dixon, Mr. Scheffler, good evening, gentlemen. Thanks again for all your hard work here. This is Jeff calling.
Yeah, I recognize your
I-
voice, Jeff.
Yeah, good evening. I've had some communication with both of you, as you recall, back in May, Congressman Higgins in his newsletter mentioned that there might be a $50 million funding there for the Vermilion by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in fiscal year 2022, the work plan, to dredge the Vermilion. And I don't think that was quite correct. I believe that's gonna be in 2024? I guess I'm just looking for clarification on that issue.
I understand it's gonna be, I asked Higgins' office for clarification on that. It's supposed to be in the Corps' work plan for 2024. Now,
Okay, so he misspoke himself, obviously.
okay, so we gotta keep in mind that things fall out of the budget, you know, so.
Yep.
Hopefully if we could at least get this spot dredge done by Cooley Mean, Rotary Point,
Right.
I think it'll hold us for a while.
Yeah, that's my second question. We all know they've been snagging the river, right? But I don't believe they've begun to spot dredge it yet.
No.
They have
Any,
not.
idea when LCG will get that underway?
I have a call into the project engineer on that. Last time I talked to him about a month ago, his plan was to have it completed by the end of the year. He sees it as a relatively minor project. He was having some, issues regarding the data he presented to the Corps regarding spall disposition sites. So we were trying to guide him to some of the spall disposition sites that, we had identified that could be possibly used. So, there is a spall disposition site, that was used in the 97 dredge. We know where it's at. We've been out there. It doesn't look like it's in agriculture right now. It's just an open field. And I can't see why it couldn't be used again. So they'd have to contact the landowner. There are other locations in town, close proximity to the river, that could be used as a spall disposition site.
Yeah,
Because the amount of spall is not tremendous.
right.
It's not a tremendous volume of spall.
You have some
So-
bore pits around the airport that are over 100 feet deep. That like 20-acre pond, 100 feet deep, and the owner wouldn't mind putting 50 feet of dirt in it. So anyway, but thank you, Jeff. One of the issues we've dealt with is I guess, the concern other parishes have for what's happening and the impact. You know, Vermillion Parish is trying their best to block any dredging into Vermillion. You know, St. Martin Parish and Lafayette Parish are suing each other. You know, and I think the important point to be made here is when parishes are fighting each other and suing each other, the politician, decision makers stand back and watch and do nothing. Look at Boyles and Evangeline and St. Landry, Rapides, those parishes all pulling together, and they making things happen. And that's the message being made. When parishes pull together, no politician can ignore them. When parishes are fighting each other, all the politicians can ignore them.
Indeed.
So, thank you, Jeff.
Thank
We're at the
you.
end of our time. Thank you for your concern. Come to the Sierra Club meeting, we'll keep you informed. So Dave,
As soon as
thanks.
my high heels, you'll see me.
Yes, sir.
Intended.
Thank you, Jeff. So Dave, thanks a lot for being here. It's kind of the end of our program. You had a comment on the last part there?
Well, we did have a few other, yeah. We want to do a beaver infestation survey of the Baycatawba overflow swamps. And we're asking the Corps to re-enter a study that they had put on hold for a while that involves Baycatawba, Baycocodri. And I can't even remember what the last one was because we jumped ahead there.
So again, thank you, Dave, for being here. And the map shows a proposed national park. It doesn't have any roads, doesn't have any homes, it's all swamps. They got a crazy squirrel in there that looks like a skunk. It's black with black and white stripes on the back of it. It's not a skunk, it's a squirrel, but I haven't been able to find anybody who knows anything about it other than the crawfishermen and hunt.
I think I've seen one like that.
Yeah.
2 minutes at a time thing, because we started late.
So we got a little bit of time. So this unique squirrel, I've asked, wildlife and fisheries people about it, and I have seen them, and it's quite an unusual little critter, and it's really in one part of Lake Falls Point on the north side over there near Pesh Coulee, where these critters are, so.
So it's not red,
No,
It's
no.
not gray.
It's not gray.
It's black like a skunk
It's
with
kind
a
of
white
a
streak on
dark
it.
gray. It's not like a black fox squirrel you see all over the basin. It's dark gray, and it has a black back with coloration just like a skunk, and white stripes, you know.
Yeah,
If you saw it around with you, you'd think it was a little skunk, but skunks don't climb trees.
yeah.
So anyway, we hope that, these projects, each one of them can make a difference. And each one, like, I think that taking the gates at Henderson out would be a plus for us. I think to revisit, and we've worked with Tulane on this, revisit the whole water management plan and put into not only management during flood conditions, but management during normal water conditions, during drought conditions as we have it now, and to remanage fisheries, to restore the tarpon, to restore shrimp and crabs in Henderson and so forth, restore the tidal exchange. Right now, Lake Falls Point is a back swamp. I mean, it's back and forth with the tide. Historically, the river flowed through it all the time. We should restore that flow.